If I had to describe my childhood in one word, it would be dark. I didn't really get a chance to have a normal childhood or run around and play too often. In the moments that I did get a chance to do that, I was very grateful for it. The reason being was we grew up really poor and we were always living in Section 8 housing, which for upstate New York just means kind of crappy apartment buildings. We moved around a lot. There would be times where I would come home from school and all of our stuff would be in boxes. And it was that moment that I found out that we were moving because we had been evicted. My mom suffers from depression, as do I. I have that as well. And at one point in my childhood, she decided that we were going to just move to Nebraska, to Omaha, Nebraska. But she didn't really have a plan for how we would survive out there. And ultimately we ended up in a homeless shelter. At this time I was about 8 years old and I didn't understand just how bad our situation was because I met a lot of other kids and I made a couple of friends and I actually had a good time. I remember the homeless shelter getting a limo and taking all of the moms and the kids kind of around to see Christmas lights, and I had so much fun that night, and I really didn't understand the gravity of being homeless at that time because I was really young. I knew that something wasn't right because we weren't home and I hadn't seen, other members of our family, so I knew something was wrong, but I just tried to have fun and just be a kid any chance that I got. We ultimately returned back to New York, I'm not quite sure how, and we lived with friends of my mom. I ended up calling them aunt and uncle. They had other kids and I enjoyed living there. I enjoyed the routine that they had in their home, but I knew that this was just another temporary fix. I knew that we would be moving out of that trailer at the time. I knew that we would have to leave and I'd have to leave another group of friends behind because this wasn't really our home. A short time after that, my mom rented a house. It did accept Section 8 things, so HUD housing, and my mom was also on disability and food stamps and all of that my whole life. It wasn't long after my mom rented this really small yet adorable house that I loved that she had a stroke. Now, I had already missed a lot of school and I was bounced around so much that it was just kind of difficult for the school districts to keep track of me. After my mom got sick, everything changed. I could no longer go to school every single day. I had to stay home and take care of my mom as many days as possible. We had a nurse coming into our home a couple times a week, so I had to fill the void when the nurse was not there. My mom had to learn how to walk again, and she had to learn how to speak again. Now, I was a very young kid. I was 9, 10 at this time, and I was being a nurse to my mom. So my childhood was filled with so much darkness. During the time that my mom was sick, the friends that we had moved from Nebraska to New York, we moved in with them in their trailer. They came over quite a bit to help out, and they would discipline us. And the way that we would be disciplined was we were spanked with wooden paddles for minor things. And the physical abuse got so bad at one point that my mom's friend lost control and he beat me so badly that I had bruises up half of my back and down to the middle of my legs, and I had to sit in an ice bath at 10 years old. And when I think back to just how angry I was as a kid, I think back to moments like that. Moments of having to move around and not having stability. I think of moments of sitting in that ice bath at 10 years old because I'm so swollen and bruised from the abuse. My mom has apologized so much and I forgive her completely. We have a good relationship now, but when I think back to why I was so angry as a child, that's definitely top of the list for me. We had moved probably 5 times from the age of 10 to 12 when I moved to a small town on the Pennsylvania border called Hancock, New York. And it was there that I started to really get bullied. I was bullied because I looked different, because I was poor, because I didn't have nice clothes, because I was that weird kid in the corner reading a book. And up until that point, I was a really good kid. I loved to read and I didn't bother anybody and I really kept to myself. I was super introverted even as a child. All I wanted to do was be left alone so that I could read. And one day, this girl, I still remember her name and what she looked like. I remember this day so clear. She was picking on me for my haircut. I had a shorter haircut at the time, and I was mad and I threw a book at her and I got sent to detention. Well, it was at detention that I met my first real friend, or the first friend of mine that I actually had that I would invite over to my house and such. Well, it was at detention where this friend said, "Do you want to go back to my house?" And I was so excited that someone else invited me to their house that I was like, yes, I do. Now, at this time, my mom's depression really skyrocketed, and a lot of days she wouldn't even get out of bed, which I didn't understand at the time. I now completely understand that because I have days where I also don't want to get out of bed. My depression is also pretty bad. So it was when I was 12 years old that I got offered my first sip of alcohol, and it was a beer, and I thought it tasted so gross, but I finished the beer because it was offered to me, and that was the day everything changed. I chased the feeling of feeling free. I had always been so shy and insecure and introverted and alone and anxious and worried, and this was the miracle. This was the answer. It took away that pain. It took away everything, and I was not a shy, insecure, quiet little kid anymore. I felt okay, and for a long time I thought that there was nothing wrong with that, because if it makes you feel good and it makes you happy, what could possibly be wrong with that? A short time after that, I was jumped because I went to a party and I stole some drugs from a drug dealer, some cash and some cocaine that he had, and 4 or 5 girls found me and they jumped me. I ended up cracking my ribs, my face was all busted up, my nose was broken. They kicked me so many times when I was on the ground, and I remember specifically feeling, as they're kicking me, my face scraping on the pavement. And I was prescribed OxyContin at 13 years old. My mom thought that I could handle taking my prescriptions on my own, but that same friend that I met in detention showed me that I could crush it up and snort it, and I would feel better, and I wouldn't be in this amount of pain. At that time, my room was called the Swamp. It's from MASH. They called their tent the Swamp, and my room had clothes all over it. It was very dark. I had taken light bulbs. We had like sky lighting, so I took all the light bulbs out, and it was very dark on purpose, and I wouldn't even open the blinds. During my recovery process of getting jumped, I stayed in that room almost every single day. There was plates and dishes, and that is very unlike me. It was almost like everything that I was feeling was just thrown all over the floor. Once I got better, I started sneaking out and partying, and my mom noticed that I was getting out of control. I had such a chip on my shoulder from everything leading up to that point. So I moved in with my dad, and my addiction had pauses, but my addiction never stopped. I definitely would always chase a substance. I ultimately made the decision to start selling drugs. I had gone from being a powerless kid that was abused, that moved all around, that was poor, that couldn't even afford nachos in the school cafeteria, to people calling me all the time, asking me for stuff. I felt needed, I felt important, I felt powerful. And for the first time, I felt as though I had control over my life, when in reality, I was losing control of it all. But for a short time, I felt like I was on top of the world. I felt like I have all this money and I can buy whatever I want. No one's gonna talk shit to me anymore because I'm not a poor, insecure, shy kid. And that, of course, created a lot of problems for me. I got arrested at 16 years old for sales of controlled substance. I had sold to a kid who overdosed. He survived. And instead of being afraid that I could hurt somebody else, that anger from my past and my knowledge of not snitching and all of these things that I was starting to pick up on the street, I was very angry at him for snitching, and I threatened his life. Over the course of 10 years, I would get into so many fights I can't even keep track, both in and out of jail. I had so many violations that I just kept going back to jail, back to jail, back to jail. It was a constant thing for me. I thought that my life was normal. I thought that what I was doing was of my own free will, that I wanted to live this life, that I wanted to be a dealer, and that was the secret. You know, why go to a job and work, 40 hours a week and still struggle? I did not want to struggle, so much so that I was willing to do whatever it took to make money so that I could be okay. And for me, that meant selling drugs or guns or anything that I could get my hands on. At that time, I truly was a danger to society, and I needed to be put behind bars. In 2011, my life changed forever when I ran from a set of felonies that I was completely innocent of. I knew I was innocent. My lawyer told me that I could get out of this, but I couldn't fight from the county jail because I couldn't pay him from the county jail. When you are arrested as a dealer, they seize all of your assets, and they would have taken all of my money, and I wouldn't have been able to pay, so I ran. I had gone on the run at this point probably 4 times. The first time I went on the run, I was like 18 or 19 years old, and I linked up with these magazine salespeople, and I met some of my best friends on a magazine crew. We would go door to door and sell magazine subscriptions, so ESPN, Maxim, all kinds of things. And I remember having a lot of fun, but I also remembered not liking having a boss. And I had a lot of conformity issues being on this crew, and I didn't want to take orders from anyone or work as hard as they wanted you to work. So I quit the magazine crew a bunch of times. I was even fired one time. But this last time when I went on the run in 2011, this was at the height of my addiction. And I thought in my twisted addict mind that I was a superhero. And it was my superpower that I could find a drug dealer in any city, any state, anywhere, anytime. And I would do just that. My heroin addiction at this time was so severe that my arms were completely covered in tracks. I would do anywhere from 2 to 3 bundles a day. I had been using intravenously for some time, and I started using intravenously at the age of 18. So at 22, I was on the run. I lost my apartment, my family, my friends. My boyfriend was in jail. My sister was in jail. My best friend was in jail. Everyone in my town hated me. I owed a dealer over $30,000 because I was using and trying to deal at the same time. So I completely lost control. I lost control over everything. What I thought was my business, my biggest asset. This was, the horrible thinking of an addict. I thought that my business was selling drugs, and I beat myself up because I was cutting into my profit so severely that I was getting into debt. And I would have people around me that would help me get out of debt by selling for me, and then I'd get right back into debt again, and my runners would be pissed. I had several people quit on me at the end, and they wanted nothing to do with me because I wasn't paying them what they deserved on the street. I was cutting into their profit, my profit, and I was paying for my addiction, my boyfriend's addiction, I was paying my mom's bills. I was so cut thin and so depressed because of it. What once was my source of strength, which was having money so no one could talk shit to me, was now my biggest trigger. I tried over a dozen times to stop using heroin. I remember one time going to the methadone clinic, desperate for help, and I was placed on methadone, and then my second time going, I was late and they refused to give it to me. Now this was 10 years ago, so medically assisted treatment's come a long way since then, but I was turned away and I was shamed, and I remember the lady being really mean to me, telling me that, you're 5 minutes late, you don't get it. I never reached out for help after that. I had gone to NA meetings and AA meetings. The first time I went to a meeting, I was 17 years old, and my dad's coworker took me. My dad was in such denial that I had a problem, but she was a recovering alcoholic, and she saw what I was going through. She was so kind to me and offered to go to this meeting, and when we walked in, it was in the basement of a church. Now, this is my first experience with meetings. It's in a basement of a church. It was very dark, and it was told to me that the anonymity of it was important and that we were all anonymous. You're free to speak here. And I remember at that meeting feeling shame because I was an active user. I was so afraid to open up. And even though I heard other people's stories in that meeting that were inspiring, I still felt so much shame. And I hid my addiction further. And between the meetings that I would sometimes go to with my dad's coworker and getting rejected at the methadone clinic, I just hid it more. Now, over the course of my life, I had always hidden my addiction from those that I cared about, like my family, my mother, my father, my friends in school. I tried really hard to live a double life and to not let people know what I was going through. When I went on the run in 2011, I ended up in Arkansas, and I ended up on methamphetamine. That was the darkest time in my addiction. What I thought couldn't have been more dark as a 3-bundle-a-day heroin habit was 10 times worse on meth, because I wasn't eating, I wasn't drinking, and I wasn't sleeping. I had to put timers on my phone to remember to drink a Gatorade and also pee. The looks I would get in public, again, made me feel like a piece of shit. It was at this time that I was getting harassed so severely on social media that I had to delete my social media. I was called a junkie, an addict, slut, bitch, every possible thing you could imagine. It was in that shame, as well as guilt from everything that I had done, and a lot of sadness, as well as sleep deprivation, all of it compiled together, and I tried to take my own life. I tried to pull the trigger on a Glock that I had bought illegally, and I just couldn't. I tried twice, and I couldn't do it, and I went outside, and someone picked me up to go to the casino. And it was so odd because I was just in this dark, condemned, really gross trailer, and now here I am at this brightly lit casino, and everything seems so happy and completely different from where I just was an hour before, sitting in a condemned trailer, about to shoot myself in the head. October 20th of 2011, I was arrested again, this time for possession of meth, delivery of meth, and simultaneous possession of drugs and a firearm. A couple weeks into my jail stay, I found out that I was also pregnant. Now, I was so scared that I was in complete denial. I never wanted to be a mother because I thought the world was so dark, and I thought that I couldn't bring another person into this dark world. But the truth is, my world was dark, and life is so beautiful. My daughter was born on June 12th at 3:30 p.m. She was almost 7 pounds, and she had so much hair and was so beautiful. But my birth story isn't like most people's birth story, because I was chained to a bed and I was an inmate. The traumatic experience of having a baby in prison led to PTSD and postpartum depression. After a few weeks of not being able to get out of bed in the prison infirmary, I decided that I would get up, I would learn everything I could possibly learn about parenting and addiction and how to stay sober and how to just be a good person, because I was not a good person before. I hurt people. I lied to people I loved. My whole family and friends would walk on eggshells because my temper was so severe, and I wanted to change that. There were so many days where I would just wake up angry. So how can I fix that? How can I not wake up angry anymore? Well, it starts with sobriety. And slowly but surely, the more and more time I had into my sobriety, I started to regain confidence. I started to not wake up so angry. I started to love myself, and I started to be comfortable in my own skin. And while that took a long time, I could see it. I could see the light at the end of the tunnel. When I got released from prison, my daughter was in foster care, and I paroled out homeless to a halfway house. I had prison flip-flops. I didn't have sneakers, prison sweatpants, and a really torn up Bible that I had carried with me for 2.5 years with phone numbers and stuff in it, which is the only thing that you're allowed to keep, like in segregation in prison and what have you. I wore my heart on my sleeve when I first got out of prison. I told employers that I am a felon, but I'm hungry. I'll do anything for this job, for this chance, for this opportunity. I was able to get a job as a telemarketer, and I was also able to get a job at a vapor store. And the vapor store wanted to offer me $8 an hour, and I negotiated to 10, which was terrifying for me to do because I didn't want to push back. I just needed the job. Pay me anything, like I just need this job. So I negotiated scared, and I got $10 an hour from that job, and I was so grateful for it. Once a week, I would go to Plato's Closet and get a couple of shirts, jeans if I could afford it, and sneakers if they had them in my size. I was very slowly getting everything that I needed. I was working a DHS case to get custody of my daughter for an entire year. I had donated furniture, and I would also go to Goodwill to see if they had any like kids' toys that I could wash and reuse, or clothes or furniture. I was able to get clothes donated to me for my daughter, and I was able to set up a little bedroom for her in an apartment that I had to beg for because they didn't want to rent to me. I had been turned down for apartments at least 20 times while I was trying to get an apartment because I am a felon. After a year, I got custody of my daughter, and she came home to live with me, and I could barely make spaghetti, and every single day I had to figure out how to be a parent. And while I'm still learning exactly the right way to parent, because this is very hard, I am so grateful for my kids. I'm so grateful for Micah. I'm so grateful that I went through what I went through because it made me stronger. We have been blessed with a second daughter, and they give me a purpose every single day. I now have 8 years of sobriety, and I am not anonymous. My name is Jessica Kent, and I'm a recovering drug addict. I will no longer shame myself or put myself down because of the trials that I went through. I will no longer tell myself that I am less than because I'm a recovering addict. I will no longer put myself down because I struggle with depression, anxiety, PTSD. I am more than my mental health. I am more than my past addiction, and I am not anonymous. It is my hope that in sharing my story that other people will know how badass they are and how strong they are and how fierce you are. If I had given up when life got so hard, you wouldn't know my name. I wouldn't be here, my children wouldn't be here. I never thought that I could beat my addiction. I never thought I was strong enough. I never thought that I could do it. And I really didn't think that I would be a mother. I always felt so much shame around my addiction, getting booked into jail, going to drug and alcohol treatments, going to AA and NA occasionally, going to the methadone clinic. I always felt as though people looked at me as if I was less than, instead of looking at me as a person in pain, desperate for the answers to stay sober, desperate for understanding my own mind, desperate for change. I was never able to stay sober doing time in New York. There are drugs in most facilities across this country. Everyone always told me that I would fail. Correctional officers told me, she's a fucking junkie, she'll be back. I've been called a lost cause by so many. To the people that never gave up on me, thank you. To the people that always knew that I could get and stay sober, thank you. Your words stayed with me through some of my darkest moments. There's so much misinformation about drug addiction out there. A lot of people have been hurt by drug addicts, and they're angry, and justifiably so. But we need to stop spreading hate into the world because that never made anyone better. Judgment, shame, hate, belittlement, it never made anyone want to get sober. I always wanted to numb all of the pain that I had inside of my brain. Growing up on a substance, I didn't know how to properly handle difficult moments, moments of pain, moments of failure. I always ran towards a substance. When I was sad, when I was upset, when I was hurting, when I was broken, when I wanted to party, when I wanted to have fun, I always ran towards a substance, no matter what the mood was. I would do any and everything to numb the pain that I was feeling, and I never dealt with it until much later. As a mother, it is my hope that I am creating a life that my children don't have to heal from. As a mother, I now know what I put my family through. As a mother, I no longer see another struggling addict as just another addict. I see that as someone's son, someone's daughter. And I have made it my life's mission to help anyone along the way that I can. Although my past was so dark, my future is so bright. If you or someone you know struggles with suicidal thoughts, addiction, depression, please reach out for help and support. You are so much more than your worst mistake. You're so much more than your worst day. You're so much more than your mental health. If you are a felon struggling to get on your feet, you can do anything. If you were a successful criminal, you can be a successful square, just like me. My name is Jessica Kent, and I am not anonymous.